We're talking about, should the Southern Baptist denomination change its name?
We've got the best of the worst preaching mistakes.
John Calvin's always a good topic. We're also going to look at Rob Bell leaving the church he started, and for the second week in a row, is the Catholic Church changing its stance on marriage for priests. All this and more on this edition of Faith Today. Welcome into Faith Today. I'm David.
I'm Chase.
I'm Nick.
And with the X to block, I'm Chris.
All right. Gang's all here. So this is Faith Today, where we take a look at the world around us through the lens of faith in Jesus. Real issues, real people, a real faith for a real world.
As always, we want to remind you to go to our website, faith2.com. We've recently added podcast feeds. You can subscribe to iTunes. You can subscribe to any podcast client with the RSS feed. Also be a part of the discussion there. Comment on the post with any questions, other insights you may have, be a part of the discussion of the show.
All right, hey, we want to start out talking about the worst preaching mistakes ever. And we're actually going to show you a video. This is Mark Dever talking with James McDonald and Matt Chandler about some of the worst mistakes they've made. So here, watch the video.
Okay, worst mistakes we've made in preaching recently. I got a doozy to start out with.
Let's hear it.
I've been preaching through Mark's Gospel, and I'm embarrassed telling this. I was preaching on the widow's mites. You know?
The widow's mite.
You know, the two being cast in. And I was talking about how you interpret it. And I said, now, I was saying various things this doesn't mean. I said, now, one of the things this doesn't mean is that, you know, next Sunday you put 2 pennies in the offering plate. That'd be a blessing.
Oh my goodness!
I just undermined exactly what that passage was about. I just showed I was a complete hypocrite. I mean, I didn't mean to.
I know. Did the people
really
kind of grimace? Could you see it in their faces?
No, it was too fast. I mean, it just went by real fast.
You knew.
But oh yeah, and when they knew, about 30 and 45 seconds later, you could tell I was saying other stuff, but everybody was thinking about. He just said the 2 pennies don't count.
Now you did some sarcasm there in your message.
Well, it wasn't a manuscript. I mean, it was just a little. Okay. This is why, Matt, I try to keep my personality.
No, this happens to me all the time.
Because I have such a bad personality. So the manuscript helps me keep it down.
Simply not true. Anyway. All right, Matt, what do you got? Man, I'm trying to think of something lately, and I can go back and think of a couple of things that were just your best one, big blow
catastrophic.
Well, honestly, in front of about 1,000 people, I was talking about depravity, and I was like, listen, you were born evil. That's not something that happened to you because of your environment. You were brought forth in iniquity, and I had this little girl. I mean, I'm speaking to like 1,000 teenagers. This little girl starts waving at me, and so I just try to ignore and just keep preaching, and she wasn't having it. I mean, she's eventually standing up in the third row, and so I was just like, okay, yes. And she was like, do you have any children? I mean, I didn't have any children. Lauren and I have been married a year. I was like, no, I don't have any children. She goes, then don't tell me my baby's evil. So I was just like, wow. So then this is in front of everyone. So then I have to go, okay, tell me, a boy or a girl, what's his or her name? Has he bit anyone yet? Yeah.
So
you actually tried to move her forward
I'm trying to help. Oh, this is not going well.
Well, it gets worse. But I kind of talk her through, and then she's fine, and she sits down. I go on preaching, and a grown-up, if you will, in the back starts like waving at me, and so I try to ignore it. She's not having it. I mean, she's actually coming up an aisle waving. So I finally stop and go, okay, yes, ma'am. And she was like, I think I kind of agree with her. This is what actually caused me to start sending a theological piece in my writer. And so I said, okay, we'll just do it. If you can give me any verse, because I don't want to talk about what we think here, but if you can give me a text, then I'm more than willing to talk about that text with you. And she, said, oh, that's easy. And God made it, and it was good. And so I had to got every bit of my wit and sarcasm was just, I was raining it. I was trying to pull up the plane because I wanted to say, hey, just keep reading, Mama. There's this thing that happens in chapter 3 that ruins the rest of it. But that was such a bad, awkward moment because I'm literally trying to fix this as I'm preaching. It was just catastrophic.
And now you've got to say it to her.
Yeah.
And now I have. So if you're out there, keep reading. Chapter 3.
Yeah. Great video. So I tell you this about listening to Chandler. That's one of my, not fears, but just in the middle of a message and all of a sudden someone just wants to challenge you on what you're saying, and how would you handle that? How would you handle that situation?
That's tough.
But
I'm surprised he actually
engaged.
Let them ask a question.
Well, he said he was young. I mean, look, what are you going to do? I've never really faced that, but if
yeah,
somebody stands up and starts waving their hands at you, what are you? Hey, you over there, shut up.
Well, look,
I'm not
I
going to call
think
you right
you're
now.
going to acknowledge it, but now I've been in some churches where I think some people would probably just go over there and usher them out. You know,
Oh, absolutely. I definitely.
And I don't think that's the way to handle it.
No, I
mean,
do not think that's the way to handle it. I mean, I think the only thing you do is what he did, but it does bring us to a good topic.
Yeah.
Talking about preaching mistakes, and so all right, maybe Chase, we'll go with you first.
Why are you pointing at me?
Because you have a library of them that we.
Okay, yeah, it is true.
What are
I
some
have,
of your
like good
worst preaching mistakes?
I
for
have
you?
made some pretty epic misspeaks. One of them happened recently. I guess I'll tell two. One of them happened recently. I was talking about. I don't even remember. I was talking about accountability, sin, stumbling, overcoming, and I had been using pornography as an illustration the whole time. And at one point in the message, I said, I have been using pornography all day, meaning as an illustration.
There was a pause there.
There was a pause
there at the end.
And everybody kind of chuckled. Well, my good buddies running the sound that night, they clipped out that one little phrase, I've been using pornography all day. And they made it into a ringtone. And so now whenever I call one of them on the phone, their phone says, I've been using pornography all day.
I wish we had that sound clip right now.
When those people that did that are with their phone and I call them and they're sitting there with a bunch of their friends and that goes off.
All of a sudden that goes off.
Yeah, that's kind of awkward.
All right, now that's not my favorite one of yours.
Well, I'll tell it in a second.
tell it in a second?
You've
Okay.
got like about 50. Hey,
What was that?
Is that what
What was that?
That's the one.
Wait.
I've been using pornography all day.
That's awesome.
No, or is it this one?
I've been using pornography all day.
Okay.
I think it was that one.
This is
I
embarrassing.
think it
real
was
quick.
that one.
Oh,
I've been using pornography.
hope my mom isn't watching. I'm sorry, Mom.
All right, now mine, which was in the last year, is not much better than that. Along those same lines, we were having a repentance service, corporate repentance service here at Agape, and I was actually I was leading part of it, and I was talking about the people of God, where God is talking to His people about defaming His name by their actions. And I told a story, quite honestly, I've been pretty open about, I had a 10-year battle, 10-year addiction to pornography myself. And so I was recounting there was a time in my life to where I was going to church on Sunday mornings. I was raising my hands and worshiping. But at night I was going home and spending the night looking at pornography on the internet. Not something I was proud of, but something that I felt defamed the name of God. And so I'm preaching about this. I'm talking about it. And I come to a part, I've just told that story. I said, now look, I felt bad. But apparently I didn't feel bad enough because I still do it. Yeah. Now, what I meant was I still pull glory from the name of God by my actions. But apparently what I told the entire church was I still come to church on Sunday mornings and go home and look at pornography at night.
Yeah.
And I had people coming up after the service saying, man, I appreciate your boldness. I didn't know that, some guys coming up to me, friends of mine, man, I didn't know that was still an issue. And I had no idea, and I started talking to some people and realized everybody took it that way. So everybody in the church thought that I was still looking at pornography at night.
The first thing that came to my mind wasn't something I'd done, although I'm sure there are numerous, but have you guys ever had an example of somebody just not making a mistake, like a verbal mistake, but just a blatant misrepresentation of facts?
Well, hey,
Look, that
preachers throw
happens,
around
that happens. Yeah.
preachers throw around statistics, and especially made-up statistics. Probably one of the biggest sources of urban legends in America is preachers.
Recently, I heard a pastor blame Harry Potter for the goth phenomenon. A phenomenon that was well on its way, if not
decades before,
in full effect, but was well on the way to being in full effect when I was in high school, before Harry Potter was even published the first time. And it's just like, come on, dude, like, where are you getting your facts from?
Yeah.
So I guess that there's more than just trying to detract from y'all's pornography use.
Well, hey, serious business. There's probably some people watching right now and thinking, well, what is that all they talk about is pornography? But the fact of the matter is the church has been silent on the issue of pornography for years and years now. And statistically what's happened is there's like a 50-60% of men in the church are addicted to pornography, 30-40% of women in the church are addicted to pornography, and most of the church doesn't talk about it. Well, I don't, but having struggled with pornography myself for starting in my youth and for years, that's not something I want to do. You don't cover up things like that. You hit it head on with the truth of the gospel.
I do hate though when you know when I'm preaching. I mean, I always try to get, if I'm going to use stats, if I'm going to use numbers, I always try to get those as accurate. But I was preaching here one time and I was giving figures about the population in India, I think, and I don't remember what I said, but it was like, you know, I think I said there was like 700 billion people in whatever.
I think you did.
Whatever
Yeah,
I
right.
did, I actually said the population of India, the number I gave was actually larger than the population of the world.
Yeah.
And,
Yes, I remember that.
and,
Yeah.
and everybody, you know, of course, everybody after me, and I had just gotten one too many zeros in my number, but I hate stuff like that. You know, I go home and I'm like, well, I hope people listen to the rest of the message
Yeah.
and not just my, what?
Oh my gosh.
You preach the entire message with your fly open?
Tone it.
Oh, that is.
That's kind of embarrassing.
Hey, that's embarrassing, man. That's embarrassing.
I would have told you if I was there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I'm gonna help a brother out on
couple
stuff
of
like
months
that.
ago.
I must not have been paying attention. Well, hey, I'll tell you one. I was in, this is probably the most notorious one I think I've done. I was in the middle of I was trying to be really passionate and really talk about the importance of the first commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart.
Hey, you hadn't been here very long either.
Yeah, this was
You had not been
early
here
in
very
my
long.
tenure
Yeah.
here at Agape Fellowship, and I was talking about being passionate for God and how we as Christians often put the second commandment in front of the first commandment.
I think I've heard this
And
story.
I said, if you will focus on number one, God will help you with your number twos. And
Then you actually said something too in there about sometimes I get so focused on number one that I can't do number two.
now, I believe that to be an urban legend that I did not say.
Well,
I
look,
said
what-
the first thing, but that the first thing has blossomed into all these stories about number one and
I
number
don't,
two.
I don't know if you want to call it blossom.
Oh, well, maybe not.
When I tell
can't even
the-
talk about the great commandment and the second commandment anymore.
When I tell
always
the
say number
story,
two,
when
and
I
it's
tell
just-
the story, I tell it that way.
I
So
know
that's
you do.
how tell
I
the
think you
story.
embellish. It's evangelistically speaking that you tell it that
Yeah.
way.
Hey,
I think.
So here's the question. Maybe let's do it from a funny segment, and then maybe or from a funny standpoint, and then maybe not so. But do you find yourself like if you hear someone make a mistake, just slip up? Do you want to correct them while they're preaching? Like you're sitting in the audience and they say something. Do you want to correct them? Do you want to be corrected if you've made a mistake, slip of the tongue? Not necessarily funny, but just maybe you've just misstated a word or misstated a fact. Do you want someone to correct you then, or just let?
Well,
you
let
keep
me
going?
throw it back on you because you're the one that had the story where you told the church you still did pornography all the time. Would you prefer that somebody had slipped up their hand and said, did you just say you still?
Look, in that situation, I would because I would want to go ahead and just say it so I can get it right.
Yeah.
One time I was preaching and I was talking about, I don't even remember what it was. I think I was talking about youth ministry and how I was not a big fan of fundraisers to help programs in the church. I'd rather see us raising funds to help people and the poor. And I talked about, so we're not going to do fundraisers to put vans on our church tires. And someone slipped their hand up and everybody started laughing. I was like, what? And they said, well, you said fundraiser to put vans on the church tires. And I said, well, yeah, we got an entire shed of tires that we need vans
That's
for.
awesome.
So you can do something
right.
to
Recovery.
kind of to
Yeah.
recover from it. So I would rather, from that, I don't want to get into a theological debate with someone
Right.
in that moment. But I'd rather, hey, if I make a mistake, I think you can funnily do it. Funnily? Is that a word?
Funnily? I don't know.
Humorously.
That's a better word.
Humorously do it.
What can be difficult is the way we had youth structured for, even still now, it was a smaller group setting. It was much more conducive to discussion. And we can quickly get off on rabbit trails. And so
yeah.
that can be a difficult component to it, but it can add to it as well. I don't know that in the way we do Sunday morning church, if it would be the best idea, but that doesn't stop me from correcting a preacher under my breath and getting elbowed by my
Oh, yeah.
Like
Well, here's the thing. You asked me the question. I would rather actually know. Look, if I just said something just ridiculous and everybody knows it but me, I'd kind of I'd kind of like to acknowledge it. Look, you see people driving every now and then. Actually, I just saw a girl do that this week. Do this week. She was driving out of a parking lot, totally ran over the curb. And anytime you do something like that, you try to act completely oblivious to it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I just, you act like it doesn't faze you at all that you ran over the curb. But everybody thinks you're an idiot. And so I would prefer to acknowledge, I just said something about number twos, and boy, is that embarrassing, and deal with it and get through it, than just try to act like it didn't happen. Because that's a train wreck.
Yeah.
That guy, the
Yeah, be careful. Be careful.
pitching
Pitching
gentleman.
of the tents.
Yes.
Yes.
That is
He
the
tried to get
classic.
through that, and it just blew up.
He tried to really quickly move past
Yeah.
it, and he couldn't. He started sweating, his face turned red,
He
and
turned
everybody's
beet
laughing,
red.
and so that's a good one.
Well, we were talking about Second Commandment earlier issues. I'll tell you this. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm going to ask you if you've ever seen something like this or experienced it yourself, where you have physical issues preaching. Similar to Sam's story. A buddy of mine, I'm not going to name his name, you might even watch the show, but he was preaching a message one time, and he started to get sick.
Yeah.
And he sat down. And said, I'm just not feeling so well. I'm going to have to sit down. And he tried to keep preaching, but he was squirming around in such a way that you could tell something really terrible was happening. And when you're preaching, you're all alone. And so finally he said, I'm sorry, Sam, and Sam was worship leader at the time. He said, Sam, can you come up and just play something? I'm going to have to go. And so he just kind of rambled off the stage, and I'm not sure what happened off the stage. He did go in the direction of the bathroom, came back and said a few more things, and that was it.
When Sam told me that story, if he remembers, I actually said, look, I don't know how I would
No, Sam,
handle
don't
that.
say his name.
Yeah, we can't talk about
Yeah.
he knows. But I actually said, look, I think, and I would want to be careful because I wouldn't want to say I heard from God, but I think I would want to be like, I feel like we need to do some worship right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think I would I feel like we need to do some worship. Sam, could you come up and play for us for a few minutes, and let's just move back into worship? Because, I mean, truly, I may feel like we need to go do some worship right then because I can't keep preaching.
I was about to say.
I do
don't
not
know
think
that
I
you
would have
wanna-
handled it. I appreciate his honesty. I don't think I'd have handled it that way.
Well, everybody
I
could
got
tell
nothing.
what was going on.
I got nothing.
Everybody could tell what was
There's
going on.
nothing to say on that.
Well, hey, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the controversial issue of whether Southern Baptists, of which you are one, I understand. Oh, wait. Southern Baptists, should they change their name or not?
There's something about a quiet forest that reminds you of how much God really loves you. I mean, picture, if you will, the Garden of Eden. Eve's already been tempted, and Adam's already failed, and Satan's already tempted Adam and Eve into sin, and God's already brought down judgment on all of them, and now he's cast them out of the Garden of Eden, and they're somewhere in a field somewhere toiling away, watching flocks or making bread, and God visits the garden, and it's quiet. And even though he's already made plans to bring Adam salvation through his son Jesus Christ, his heart is heavy because he longs for what he had. He longs for what he had back in the garden. He longs to be with Adam and to be in relationship with Adam. And he longs for that relationship with us. And he loves us that much. Out in the woods, you're on the road with John.
All right, welcome back to Faith Today. We'll remind you to go to our website, faith2.com, and you can now subscribe to our podcast in iTunes right there on the website, faith2.com. Is that right, guys?
That's right. You
All right.
can do it.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about a
We are
story.
Southern.
The
Yeehaw.
Okay.
and being Southern,
Yes.
you may care about this.
I do.
And being Baptist.
I care
like Nick.
deeply.
Okay, so Nick, the quintessential Southern Baptist.
That's right. I always think Southern Baptist when I look at Nick.
I bet you do.
Absolutely. But he may soon not be a Southern Baptist because they're thinking about changing their name after
or how about 'cause it never was?
166 years.
That's right.
Now thinking about changing the name of
That's
the
right.
convention.
That's right. The president of the Southern Baptist Convention is a fellow named Bryant Wright. He is the pastor of Johnson Ferry Baptist Church, which is an elder-led Baptist church, by the way, if you're paying attention at home. But he's the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. He has unilaterally, some say, appointed a commission to investigate the name change from Southern Baptist to something else. So what do you guys think about this?
So we don't have any suggestions yet on what we're going to change it to. Just we're going to change it, maybe.
Well, I mean, I think the point is for some people, the name Baptist has some heavy baggage, but I think the primary issue, the one that's really been focused on more, is the name Southern.
All right, so that it's more of the Southern term than it is the Baptist term.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think that's politicking. Honestly, I don't think it's to get away from Southern.
Well, I mean, that's what they're saying, and so
You
this
don't think it's to get away from Southern?
No.
What do you think it's to?
I think it's to get away from Baptist.
Really? Now, okay, reading the story, it looks like he kind of charged this task force with coming up, is there value in changing the name? If so, what should we change it to? And then they get into, are there any legal or financial ramifications for us doing this? There's been some critics saying that, hey, we do this about every decade since the 70s,
Yep.
and this is just another instance of this discussion.
Yeah.
But I kind of wonder if it's got some validity to it this time around.
Well, here's the issue, and look, this is one. We don't have tens of millions of viewers on Faith Today yet, but we're going to get emails on what I'm about to say, because the bottom line is the Southern Baptist Convention formed in the middle 19th century, based largely in part over slavery issues. A lot of the Baptists in South America, the southern part of America, wanted to own slaves, wanted to have missionaries and pastors appointed who were slaveholders, and the Northern Baptists did not want that. That was not the only issue. But it was a key issue. So the Southern Baptist Convention formed, I believe it was 1840s, 1860s. I'll have to look it up, in Georgia, and slaveholding was a particular thing in there. So this was a split motivated in part over the issue of slavery. Just like the Civil War. Baptists don't talk about that a lot these days, and in fact, you can read all these stories and find that's something that is rarely brought up. But hey, I think that's a big issue.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, Southern Baptists have repudiated it many times. 1995 was kind of the key one, have repudiated slavery. They're going to probably elect an African-American president of the Southern Baptist Convention next election in Fred Luter, which is a good thing. Certainly not saying Southern Baptists are racist now, but in the middle 19th century, maybe so.
I got a friend of mine who actually one of my mentors in ministry who left here
Billy
in
Graham.
Birmingham. Besides Billy Graham.
Okay.
But he actually left Birmingham and is pastoring a church in
John
California. Another close, but
Okay.
Piper and I don't talk as much as me and this guy.
Well, he's a good guy.
He is a good guy. But anyway, he left from here in Birmingham, and he's actually pastoring a church in California.
Yep.
and it's a Southern Baptist church, which I thought was funny because when he was telling me about that, I was like, okay, how could it be a Southern Baptist church in California? But
Yeah.
we were having this conversation recently. He's kind of leading his church in through the process of praying about a name change. And one of the reasons is, he said, out there, the Southern Baptist label is actually quite what's the word? It's a hindrance that they have to fight through.
Yeah.
They don't have a good reputation out there, and so when people hear, he said, actually, it's kind of you're Southern Baptist, oh, you're one of those, and they have to actually kind of fight through that hindrance, and that's out west, and so that kind of gives you another, maybe around here it's a positive that people spin off of, that, oh, we're Southern Baptist, but you move outside the South, not so much, according to what he was telling me.
But I don't think it's as much of a positive as much as you may realize. It may not be as negative as it is in the western half of the country, but by and large, the circles I run in before I came here, when I mention Baptist, I kind of get this, really? Look,
Yeah.
because there's just it was very abused in the community I grew up in. The Southern Baptist churches around where I grew up taught very heavily the once saved, always saved, and the examples we had coming out of that gave it a very negative connotation, and I think that has started to seep into the.
Yeah, well, I'll go along with that. I don't think it's positive. I mean, we're broadcasting from Alabama, one of the southernest states there is.
Southernest states.
Southernest. And I can use that word in Alabama because I'm from Alabama. But I'll tell you.
Didn't make it right.
Probably not. But being Southern Baptist, we are in a Southern Baptist church here at Agape. We certainly, we are not the prototypical, stereotypical Southern Baptist church at all. Yeah, but that's who we are. But that's not an advantage for us in any way. Nobody comes to us looking for a Southern Baptist church. Well, most of the people that come here hesitate to come here because we are Baptist.
We told a story in prep where a family that's started coming to the church now was hesitant because of the name. I was hesitant because of the name.
Well, a lot of the families here were hesitant because of the name.
And look, you said, you make the comment about the once saved, always saved kind of being a label
abused.
for. Yeah, it was abused. And that's, for me personally, obviously, I believe in the perseverance of the saints, but there is a distinction that kind of has went with the Baptist church for a while, that the Baptists teach, oh, you can walk an aisle, say a prayer, and then live your life any way you want to. And now you can do those distinctions in every denomination.
True.
That we could, you name a denomination, and we could probably say, well, here's the,
that should be a game we have. The
stereotype that goes with that denomination. But
that would be a fun game.
I don't, look, I'm not, all my cards on the table, I'm not the world's biggest denomination fan, just because sometimes, look, they do they do good? Sure. Yes. But I sometimes think we get too proud of our denomination, and it ends up being divisions in the church, and where Christ speaks of the importance of unity and of loving each other, and that's what's going to prove to the world the gospel's true. And denominations tend to just, to me, they tend to divide us. And so, look, if we want to be a part of one, I'm fine with that. If you're a part of the denomination, we, like you just said, we are here at Southern Baptist, but I am not a fan of having that on the sign of the church, because I just feel like it promotes something to the community. It basically, it's, hey, we're Baptists, so people who aren't Baptists don't want to come there. But that's not what we're trying to do. Yeah. We're not trying to be Baptist. We're trying to be.
We're Jesus people.
We're trying
first.
to, yes,
not Baptist first, Jesus first.
And you also had what came up this morning. We were talking about politics in terms of some scriptures we were reading and studying through in 1 Peter. And what are we first? Are we Christians or Americans? What are we first? Are we Baptist, or are we Assemblies of God? Are we Church of God? Are we Methodist? Or are we Christians? Yeah. Now we can look. All three of us at the table. You throw out a scripture, and we
four
have.
Of us.
I'm sorry.
There's
four of us at the table.
Look, I just need him to speak up. Okay.
He is quiet today.
What? Oh, you got a suggestion for the name change? Southern Calvinist? Well,
but not everybody in the Southern Baptist Convention is Calvinist, Sam.
Yeah, so that's not.
But look, I appreciate what you're saying. But Nick was talking.
Thank you very much. We wear denominations like badges of honor, just kind of like we're Americans before Christians. We've got it backwards. we're Christians. We can discuss and we can disagree, and that's fine. But at the point where we are a denomination before we worry about being a Christian, something's
That's
look,
a danger.
you think of it this way: if you have someone walks up to a tree, and you're follow me for just a second,
Okay.
and you're looking at a tree. What's the first thing you're looking at the tree? What are you looking at?
The leaves.
from
The
afar.
leaves or the fruit that's on,
sure, okay, yeah.
that's on the tree. No one walks someone up to a tree and goes, "Man, look at the root system of this tree. The roots of this tree are just awesome." People look at fruit, and so you think about it like for us here, Agape Fellowship. The root system of this church is Baptist. That's how the church was founded. But we're not promoting the roots. We're not promoting the root system of the church. We want people to see our fruit. We want to be known by our fruit, not necessarily our heritage. And that's my thing. I think when you really put that out on the sign, and it's just, man, you're just promoting, we're Baptist, we're Baptist. You're promoting your heritage. What you want to be known by is the fruit. What are you doing for the kingdom? What is the fruit being born in your fellowship for the kingdom? That to me is the most important thing. That's what we want people to see.
I agree. Now, listen, I can hear some of our friends watching this and protesting and saying, for decades, Southern Baptists have stood for truth, have sent out tens of thousands of missionaries. There's a certain theological flavor you get when you're Southern Baptist. I'll say this, for 40 and under, and this is something probably some of the older Southern Baptists don't realize, for 40 and under, Southern Baptists have a negative connotation. People are less monogeneous as far as their beliefs in Southern Baptist churches. In other words, you got all kind of different beliefs now. That's not as important now. Let me ask you guys this: would you go to a California Baptist church here in Alabama? Do you think a lot of people would go? Oh, how about a New York Baptist church? Montana
Look,
Baptist
I would not
church
be
or whatever.
pulled. No, I would not be pulled to a church because it had New York Baptist on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would be kind of repelled with that, or Northern Baptist even.
Okay,
That
no,
would be
that's
kind
fine.
of
I would
weird.
be. There are denominations when I hear a churches that I'm hesitant to go. There's not a denomination that pulls me to a specific church.
Yeah.
It's what you're talking about. Your tree analogy when you said rooted in Southern Baptist, you started making me kind of. But you're right. It's the fruit because. The name was kind of making me go, do I really want to go here? But when you started telling me about the things the way the ministry was done, that kind of thing, you start looking at the fruit and you realize, hey, it's about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so
I think the way this is going to play out is probably the 40 and under pastors and leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention are going to say, hey, we need a name change. Some of the older, and look, I realize I'm doing a little bit of ageism here, a little bit of stereotyping, but typically I would imagine some of the older people are going to point to the importance of our heritage, and they're going to say, we're Baptists, we are Baptists. And I would say to that, look, we are Jesus. We are Jesus people. We're following Jesus first. And Daniel Aiken is quoted here as talking about, he's a younger pastor, he's talking about some of the barriers that the name Southern Baptist raised. Ultimately, that is a compelling argument for me. If it hinders people from coming to Jesus, it should be changed. Now, I don't mean we become the space age, hippies or whatever it takes to draw people. I'm not saying that.
Sounds like a fantasy football name.
Well, we have a name that hinders people from coming to Jesus. Maybe we should think about changing that name.
Look, I go back to, we did this discussion weeks back, Campus Crusades for Christ, talking about changing their name, and one of the reasons that they claimed they were doing that is because some of the crusades and for Christ in some of the countries, especially with a high Muslim population, the door was being shut on them right out of the gate. And so, I think it makes is your name a hindrance to the gospel? And then does it matter, at that point?
Yes.
And we had some discussion about that because it was removed, everybody's up in arms about them removing Christ from their name. But, look, I think what we are concerned about, what we should be concerned about, what Jesus is concerned about is getting the gospel out and let there not be hindrances to the gospel. And so that's how I see it. The name is not the most critical thing to me.
Absolutely.
As far as the denomination and what we're
there's going to be a lot of blood, sweat, and tears shed over this.
Do you think they're going to
honestly.
change it? Yes or no?
I don't think so.
I don't think they will.
I'll tell you this: what has to happen for them to change it is 2 straight conventions. They have to vote on it. And so look, we're looking at something years down the road.
I don't think they'll do it.
They're not annual?
I don't know.
How often do we send delegates?
I should know that. I work at a Southern Baptist
bad.
Seminary. I think it's every 2 years.
Now, our
We'll go ahead.
delegates that we're sending are going to vote. Yes.
Yes, we do send a lot of delegates. What 500 from here?
It is. It
It is somewhere in that range,
very
between
much,
0 and 500.
Very much larger than the congregation size.
Well, hey, when we come back, we're going to hit some quick hitters, some interesting stuff, so hang on. And we love you, Southern Baptists.
Amen.
Clear.
I want to welcome back all our Presbyterian and Methodist and Anglican and Catholic friends. I'm pretty sure we've lost some of our other viewers with that last segment. Do want to point you to our website, faith2.com, and ask you to subscribe to our podcast. You can do that through iTunes. You can find out that link on faith2.com.
In all seriousness, I'm afraid we came maybe a little bit too heavy in the last
maybe a
segment.
bit.
Anti-Baptist, that's not the case at all.
No.
I've grown up Baptist and love the denomination and the things that the denomination has done over the years. Just trying to make a point that that's not the most important thing.
Jesus is higher.
Jesus is much higher denomination.
Much higher.
So. Now, Sam had to step out, and
Yes.
so we have
Kevin Small, bsciencefiction.com, right? Or is it .tv?
bsciencefiction.tv. Let's Geek Out, a show that we're doing weekly now, and Kevin's a great friend of ours and a pastor himself, and so we're good to have him for this segment. We're going to do something a little bit different. Faith Today quick hitters. We're gonna hit. You don't really like that?
That's a great sound effect, wasn't it?
It's almost as if someone else uses it.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do 4 stories. We're going to go 5 minutes on each one of these stories. I'm going to keep time. And
Good job.
And we're going to.
You're gonna
it's
sound
just gonna be
buzzer.
hard
Wait, I'm
stop,
sorry. Wait,
hard
wait.
stop.
Did nobody think of the issue of David making
Hey,
sure
if
we're
you-
on?
That's true. You got the stopwatch going?
Yeah,
The
you-
segments are
okay.
5 minutes,
I am
not
the person.
55.
I'm the person you think of when you think we want
That's right.
short,
That's right.
concise messages.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm the
Because
person
I
goes
need my
to God.
time back.
All right, so we're gonna go now. We're gonna start with the story we actually tried to do last week.
Yep.
Never had got around to it, but there is a former Catholic bishop in Ireland, a respected bishop. His name is Edward Daly. He's come out
I
with a new
respect
book.
him.
I do too. He's come out with a new book, basically saying, I said a new book, not what it sounded like I said, but anyway, a new NEW book. He calls it A Troubled Sea, Memoirs of a Derry Bishop. I really don't know anything about what that title means, but
I am
he's-
troubled by a bishop putting out a nude book. I don't know about you.
It's a new
That is
book.
troubling. Oh, new book. Okay. Okay, go
But
ahead.
he is saying that allowing clergymen to marry would ease many of the church's problems. He's saying this in light of the sex scandals in the church, and he actually thinks he talks about how there are clergymen who are not going into the priesthood because of this rule that they can't
Yeah.
marry, and he believes the church should ease the restrictions on that. If you want to get married, allow them to get married. If you don't, if you want to stay celibate, then you can do that as well. So
Yeah.
you guys' thoughts on that, and how would that impact the Catholic Church?
And, well, part of it is funny in the sense of the bishop is coming out and saying, okay, we've got a tremendous problem with perversion in our ministers, so we need to marry them off. Now you got to admit that some of that is a little silly, but my goodness gracious, there's nothing in the Word of God that says ministers or priests or whatever shouldn't be married. In fact, Peter, who they claim is the first pope, had a believing wife that he carried along with him.
Well, and look, Paul implicitly says, look, if you can't abstain, get married.
married.
And hey, husbands and
Hello,
wives.
Pope. Did you hear that? The Bible, higher than you, says that.
Hey,
There goes our Catholic friends.
All right, so
Calm down,
we're going
Okay, I'm
for
gonna
a
settle
very
down.
targeted audience
bless y'all.
tonight. I take it. I mean, we're just
So,
no Baptists
if you've
and
ever
no
been
Catholics
to church
here.
before, and,
We're whittling
or
down
you're
our
not a
target
member of any
demographic.
denomination,
they say
look.
one of the keys in podcasting is focus. I'm just trying to focus and special. Okay, keep on.
All right, look.
Sorry.
But
Look.
you are right about what you're saying. I mean, the Bible gives the answer for, look, you are tempted to sin, you're tempted sexually, here's what you do, get married.
Yes.
That's the answer to it.
And once in marriage, Paul even says, hey, husbands, wives, don't restrict yourselves from one another. That commands to husband as well as wives. And so it covers all the bases, is all.
Yes, and I will say this. Look, in the Protestant church, almost every minister is married. In the Catholic church, none of them are. Paul does say it is better if you can to not be married. And we have a bias in the Protestant church against single pastors. That is just as ridiculous as the Catholic church bias towards single pastors.
But look,
I'll say that.
But that's one verse. He spends a lot more time encouraging husbands to be better husbands and wives to be better wives, and this is how you conduct yourself in this relationship. And he uses the relationship of a husband and wife to mirror how Christ loves the church and the church should love Christ. And so, to base your whole, that big portion of your theology on one verse is sketchy.
Yes.
They contacted the Vatican and got a spokesman, Father Federico.
Oh yes, Father Federico.
Yeah, but anyway, he said,
talked
but
many
his
times.
answer was the position on celibacy is clear.
Clear in what? Clear in church history? Yes, clear
Their
from
position is
paper
clear.
pronouncements.
The
yes.
Vatican, I think that's it. The Vatican's the Vatican's position is clear, which I kind of take it to mean, hey, we're not even, we're not going to consider this. We're not going to look at it, which
Absolutely.
I think is
Vatican here, Bible here. I just want to keep that out there.
No. Well, it should be, but where it is.
That's where I'm just saying.
Well,
that's
let's
where
take a
it's
step back here and
Okay.
just be honest.
backing up.
We're all men here.
we are.
And
yes.
most people I know who counsel people on sexual sin, pornography, temptations to have affairs.
Chase.
Why did you point at me? He's the one that had the first pornography story. All right,
Anyway,
keep
go ahead.
going.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They will tell you number 9 is at least an every 3-day activity. For those of you who didn't see the episode,
Yeah, when he checked
2
back
weeks
to
back,
number 9.
check
Hey,
back.
do y'all want to know my code for it?
No. Keep
But
going.
a
curious.
lot of times, people who counsel on these things will tell you that when you go more than 3 days, that's when men typically really begin to struggle. And can you imagine not going 3 days, not going 3 months, going 3 years or even longer, what that does to you?
I can't imagine.
No.
I'll just be straight up. I cannot even fathom.
All right, look, bottom line is they're putting restrictions, the Bible doesn't, and we're seeing problems come
Danger,
from that.
absolutely.
All right, so we are done with that segment. We are moving on, and who's next?
I am.
All right, let's go.
Got a story about a devout Christian, Ewan Murray, who has questioned the need for the Rugby World Cup matches to be played on Sundays. The 31-year-old, who has been described by his coach as the best scrummager, which who doesn't want to be called that?
That's
Yeah.
like a wide receiver, I
That
guess,
is
right?
awesome, the best scrummager.
He has decided he no longer feels it is appropriate to play on Sundays, and he has chosen to set out on Sunday matches. And here's a real interesting quote from the guy. He says, "It is basically all or nothing, following Jesus. I don't believe in pick and mix Christianity. I believe the Bible is the Word of God, so who am I to ignore something from it? I might as well tear out that page, then keep tearing out pages as and when it suits me. If I started out like that, there would soon be nothing left. I want to live my life believing and doing things God wants. And the Sabbath day is a full day." Now listen to this. "It's not a case of a couple of hours in church, then playing rugby or going down to the pub. It's a full day."
That's a great quote.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm not going to mess with that dude. He looks tough.
Rugby players,
Dude, no.
tough
Hey,
guys.
Rugby players may be, I think beyond football players, I
Look, man,
think
those
they're the
guys
toughest
don't-
guys.
Hey, look, football, it's not a sport I'd have a strong desire to play full contact, like, even padded up. Those guys don't wear pads. Like, just,
Yeah.
anyway.
But no, look, they don't wear any of the equipment that the football players wear. And
Well, hey,
they
speaking
take
of
some-
football, what do you guys think about what he was saying?
Oh,
About, the Sabbath and
I got
everything and
distracted.
Sundays.
Man, that's a
We're from the South that happens
I
in football.
tried to bring
All
a
the
topic
time.
about the Sabbath to the show like 5 times.
5 weeks in a row.
And it keeps getting shot down. So I just assume y'all don't want to talk about the Sabbath or people's
Well, here we
need
are.
for
It's
a
our
Sabbath.
time for the
And
Sabbath.
So, look, I think we ignored the Sabbath at our own peril. I don't know whether or not, look, I think we ignore taking a Sabbath at
Okay,
our own
I agree
peril. A
with that.
day of rest where we, it is assigned to God and family and resting. And now should we be really legalistic about Sundays? And that maybe that's another question. But I don't have a problem. I appreciate him and his stance and what he's saying.
I appreciate what he's saying, but this is a great question for the 4 people sitting here and a lot of people watching is, what do you consider your Sabbath? Because
Well,
the four of us
Jews-
better not consider it Sunday.
It's Friday night to Saturday night for the
Okay.
Jews, Sabbaths.
But you said taking a day a week to focus on God, focus on family, and rest, and that's none of our Sundays.
I'm saying
Yeah.
essentially, I think that's what the word teaches
Okay.
as Sabbath is. You work 6 days and take one and rest and look. I'm simply saying, I think when people hear the Sabbath, they immediately assume Old Testament concept, not
I got you.
valid in the New Testament. So let's just move on. But I think we do that at our own peril. That we just don't take a day just to push everything aside, concentrate on God and family and rest.
Yeah.
So.
But I think that's where a lot of people make their mistake, is talking about the New Testament, where Jesus says man was not made for the Sabbath was made for man. And a lot of people in the articles I've been reading about this compare Ewan to Eric Liddell.
Yeah.
And one thing that's really
Love
neat
Eric
about that is if you really look at what the man did, he had an opportunity to participate in the Olympics at his best event and stepped away because he felt like it conflicted with his Christian beliefs. But later on, he went on to be a missionary in China.
Yeah.
And he
died as a missionary.
Yes, he did. And he was put into a Japanese internment camp when the Japanese invaded China. And one of the things he did there is he saw all the kids fighting because of the pressure there, and he created games and would referee games, but he would always want to take Sunday off. And he noticed that the kids would get along every other day of the week, and on Sundays they would fight. And he chose to go ahead and referee games on Sundays as well for the benefit of the kids. So I think that's the difference when you look at this, is when it was about his personal benefit, he was like, I'm going to honor the Lord by not doing something that brings honor to me. But when it's about honoring
I never knew
kids,
that about Eric Liddell.
he honored the Lord by honoring those kids.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
Well, I'll tell you this. There's a verse in the Bible we don't talk about a lot, but it really addresses this issue of Sabbaths. Paul says in Colossians 2:16, therefore do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. Now that says to me that we no longer have to be legalistic in one sense about keeping the Sabbath. But I'm afraid, I think you are too, David, that Christians have swung the pendulum too far that way, and we don't take a day of rest.
We don't even
now.
care.
And I think
We
that's a
don't.
mistake.
And look, I think families suffer for it. I think
absolutely.
couples suffer for it. So that's my opinion.
I'm all for Ewan Murray. Good job, Ewan.
All right, here we go. We're next. We're going to Nick.
The
Next segment.
famous or infamous, depending on your perspective on his last written work, Rob Bell, turns out is, the headline is Seeks Life Beyond the Pulpit. A statement from his church, doesn't appear to be by him, which is interesting to
That
me.
is curious.
Yeah, it's something it kind of bothered me. Our founding pastor, Rob Bell, has decided to leave Mars Hill in order to devote his full energy to sharing the message of God's love with a broader audience, the church said in a statement. Went on to say Bell's resignation makes him the latest in a string of celebrity pastors, another word that bothers me, who have said goodbye to weekly sermons, potluck dinners. I don't imagine there's a lot of potlucks going on there at that Mars Hill. But
It's a big potluck.
it's a real big potluck. And other staples
I
of
love
church
potlucks.
life.
Oh, too.
It was great today.
In the Baptist church, we love potluck.
We do.
Baptists know how to do that.
Man, karate.
Wow.
We did one today.
Yummy.
He calls
Made me
out
hungry.
Brian McLaren, which I've heard I'm not real familiar with, Francis Chan, which we all know and many of us have a deep respect for, and another author, Jim Belcher.
I'd have changed that last
British.
name, but anyway. move on.
It is what it is.
All right, so we're down to Baptists, Catholics, and people with the last name of Belcher.
Belcher. I'm sorry.
Three major groups we've
We
offended
are
today.
Yeah, we're.
Mom and Dad, I love you, but I'm going to have to change that name when I get to be 18. Just going to call it.
The article goes on to talk about these high-profile pastors have now become prolific publishers, but there's not everybody is convinced the gospel is being well served when the pastors, and this is from the article from USA Today. It's not a Christian publication, but it's talking about trading a local flock for a global one. Rick Warren came out very strongly. Speaking tours feed the ego. All applause and no responsibility, said one Thursday tweet from Warren.
Wow.
It's an unreal
That's
world.
strong.
A church gives accountability and validity. And that's, when the difference here to me, this guy brings up Chan, and this isn't us bringing up Chan.
This is an
Chan
unfair
is different.
comparison.
You
compare
Well,
Rob.
so is Brian. What was the other guy's
McLaren.
name? McLaren. I don't think that's why Brian McLaren stepped away, was it?
See, I don't know much about him, so I didn't.
Okay,
wanna-
so he was not the guy that stepped away because of the humble issues or the pride.
No,
issues.
Brian
no, no.
McLaren and Tony
McLaren's a different guy.
Campolo are
Okay,
are
so I don't know
buddies.
about him. So
Yeah.
But
for
look,
instance, I want to know about.
you line up Bell and you line up Chan, and the way they resigned and the reasons they gave for resignation, and hey, the fact that Chan said this is becoming too big of it. From what I understand, he basically said, "Look, this is too big. This is too much about me.
focus on me, yeah.
And I need to go. You know, if I've got all this notoriety and all this stuff, I need to use it for other people, and I'm going."
He didn't go, and I'm going to show my bias because I am, I do admire Francis Chan and the respect of his work, and he said, "I'm leaving because of that issue. This has become too much about me," and he left for several months and went to a country.
Ever heard of.
Nobody, some remote part of a country, and just shared the gospel and worked in basically anonymously, where no one knew him. And now he's
to me,
coming
that's not an
back. He didn't go
accountability
on,
issue.
he didn't go on a speaking tour.
Yeah.
And so that's my question: what is Rob Bell? What is he leaving for? What is he stepping away from his church to do?
Well, the fact of the matter is we haven't heard from Rob Bell. I've tried to find a Rob Bell blog or whatever where he would have put out an official statement, but we haven't. I'm very curious. I disagree with Bell's theology, particularly as it pertains to raising the issues he did on hell and not being clear about something I believe the Bible is clear about. But it may be a little premature to say, "Oh my gosh, Rob Bell, you idiot! You're stepping away from the church.
Yeah.
This is all about your fame and fortune." I'm not ready to say that.
Yeah, I'm not either because I don't know
It's
what
just,
to
look,
say.
it's just, and that's the thing. We've talked about it, and look, when the book first came out, I'm like, hey, how many of you Christians, people who wear the moniker of Christian, this guy wears the moniker of Christian, and we're roasting him, okay, over what he may or may not have said in his book. Have you read the book? And I didn't say anything about the book for a long time until I actually read through it, and I wanted to read through it because so many people were coming out. Yes, this is awesome, and no, he's a sinner and he's a heretic and he should be burned at the stake. And so, like, it was just polar opposites on the issue. I've come down, I'm not a big fan of the dude, but this just doesn't, you raise that issue and then you never say anything. Like,
Look, that's Rob Bell to me. David's opinion. He stirs up too much and then lets it linger out there for too long. Even with this, I mean, and it makes it too much about the controversy surrounding him.
Yeah.
And gets the focus. To me, that puts too much focus on him. That's my
I don't
issue.
mind him bringing up,
10 seconds.
I'm sorry. I don't mind him bringing up hell and it being controversial, but say something about it. And that's what bothered me about the book. It's the same thing here. You're bringing up this controversy, you're drawing this attention to yourself, and then you don't say anything. It's just like, come on.
Yeah. All right, time on that one.
All right.
Moving on.
Now we're going to talk about Robertson versus Robertson. Last week we talked about Pat Robertson was asked the question by apparently a lonely man. His wife had Alzheimer's. He wanted to leave her and get with another woman. He said, "You know what? It's a hard issue. Basically, bottom line, but I think it's okay. No, Bible, no, no whatever." Well, we reported on that last week.
You're good.
Yeah, we reported on that last week. And now we want to talk
Now
about
I've
a
offended
different
700
Robertson. That's four people we've offended. Yeah. Robertson McQuilkin. I'll tell you what, watch this. 4 groups, yeah, 4 groups of people. Watch this video real quick. You better keep a hanky handy.
Yeah.
I haven't in my life experienced easy decision making on major decisions, but one of the simplest and clearest decisions I've had to make is this one, because circumstances dictated it. Muriel, now, in the last couple of months, seems to be almost happy when with me, and almost never happy when not with me. In fact, she seems to feel trapped, becomes very fearful, sometimes almost terror. And when she can't get to me, there can be anger. She's in distress. But when I'm with her, she's happy and contented. And so I must be with her at all times. And you see, it's not only that I promised in sickness and in health, till death do us part. And I'm a man of my word. But as I have said, I don't know with this group, but I've said publicly it's the only fair thing. She sacrificed for me for 40 years to make my life possible. So, if I cared for her for 40 years, I'd still be in debt. However, there's much more. It's not that I have to, it's that I get to. I love her very dearly, and you can tell it's not easy to talk about. She's a delight. It's a great honor to care for such a wonderful person.
Okay, wow. I mean, that comparing the
We're
two
gonna end
people.
on a high note tonight as
yeah.
far as our feelings go.
I'm having an allergy attack at the moment. Look, Robertson McQuilkin was the president of a Columbia Bible Institute. His wife had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And, you know, McQuilkin's written a lot of books, has spoken at a lot of conferences. He might not no longer be with us now, but he's a guy I really, really admired for a long time. You know, at a very strong leadership position, he stepped away to take care of his wife. Now that's the gospel of Jesus. That's truth. That's what Pat Robertson needs to see and learn from.
Yeah, you know, my wife, you know, when we were talking about the story last week, and I mentioned when we did it that you know, her grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's and her grandfather took care of her, and my wife was really, you know, hearing what Pat Robertson said, she was, you know, she was like, look, their long-term memory so many times, like was with her grandmother, they can remember back, and so you need those people in your life that were from, you know, 30 years ago, because that's the people that you remember, and she still recognized, you know, my wife's grandmother still recognized her, still recognized her grandfather, and so to just think about those people abandoning them
That's
in that
heartbreaking
moment
to
is
think
just,
about that.
yeah, and you know, maybe not to go back and really roast Pat all over again, but it just, you see that video, you see that type of response, you just go, this is the gospel, not what he was saying last week, which, in all honesty, to me, is just a very, very selfish reaction to that issue.
Yeah, I think some people had an issue with us being a little critical towards Pat Robertson last week. I want to read you a quote on that. When Christian leaders who someone has no private access to, and none of us have access to Pat Robertson, make public statements that aren't minor or secondary errors, but which undercut something as basic as the sanctity of life and the sanctity of marriage, it is not only appropriate but necessary to speak up. In other words, if we don't come out and disagree with this and repudiate the statements, it's almost like we're saying we tacitly agree with it. And what were you going to say?
No, you're talking about not wanting to roast him all over again. You want to give him credit. You want to say, did he misspeak? But we looked for the quote before we did it last week. Where did he roll it back?
I've checked his website just today. There's still no. Hey, you know what? I blew it.
And that's the thing. It's just, you know, there's so many other pictures in the Word about how to handle that. Okay.
What I'd like to see is even a step further back than what he said. We're in a world where people treat marriage like we used to treat dating when we were kids, and maybe that's why we treat marriage that way. Okay. But I would almost want to ask the gentleman who asked the question of Robertson, why are you asking that question? Are you looking because you really want to know what the truth is, or are you looking for a way out?
An excuse.
An excuse. Because
hey, don't bring logic into this. I
mean, like the guy said, he gave his wife his word. And when I
that was right there.
And I want to cry right now. But when I took Heather as my bride,
don't cry me.
I'm going to try not to. But when I took her as my bride, whatever she's going through became my standard, and for lack of a better word, my standard of sexy. Right now she's pregnant sexy. You know, if she was in an accident, lost an arm, one-armed women would be my standard. And
that's strong.
One-armed woman.
One-armed woman.
Yes. That's a good point.
All of a sudden, I really love one-armed women.
Well, I was getting bonus points
sorry,
until Nick got involved.
I was trying to help you out, brother.
But she is my standard for what I look for in a woman. And if God forbid she was ever to get Alzheimer's, my goodness, that would be beautiful to me.
Yeah.
And dang, I am going to cry.
I'm going to cry. Good. I mean, no, I'm not. I'm a man.
Okay, keep going.
10 seconds. And so if y'all can hold it 10 seconds, then y'all are all right.
It may just be time to wrap. Look, it's what he said. I gave my word. You're a man.
Yeah.
Live up to your word.
Amen.
Marriage is staying together through all sorts of difficulties, sickness and health or whatever. Proclaim the gospel, because Jesus is our bridegroom and he is with us through all sorts of difficulties.
Amen.
And he will
Absolutely.
never
Amen.
let us go.
Amen. All right. Well, great segment. Good show today.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks,
Well, thank
Kevin, for
you.
joining us, and Sam for off camera now
Yep.
for joining us as well. And so that's going to do it for this edition of Faith Today. Please join us next week when we'll have more stories and other great things. And yeah, I'm not really good at the outros apparently.
That's okay, man. Fair enough. We'll see you next week. Check out our website, faith2.com. That's going to do it for us.
Good night.